Trump got lucky. No, this isn't an expression that you might have heard around the Trump organization's offices a few years back. This is actually an article in the Washington Examiner by a columnist named, a senior analyst named David Drucker. And basically, Bill, this is the idea among the Democrats and the growing idea among Republicans that in 2016, Donald Trump won the election simply because Hillary Clinton was so darned unlikable, and that this circumstance is not likely to happen again. And so therefore, when you have candidates rising up like a Beto O'Rourke, the failed Senate candidate from Texas, or a Joe Biden, the failed human being, former vice president, you may have some legitimate threats among candidates who can take the big former industrial states and win some of those stalwart red states, because basically Donald Trump is not going to have the stars align again in 2020 the way they did in 2016. Bill, what do you think of that thesis from those behind the scenes in Republican ranks?
Well, conveniently, we just a few moments ago recorded a members-only right-angle show on the top 10 Democratic contenders for 2020, and none of them look like, giant killers. I think the initial point is correct. I think the only way that Donald Trump could have become president was running against Hillary Clinton. It's a strange thing that Donald Trump was the only person who could have beaten Hillary Clinton, and that's true because Donald Trump is the only person who was willing to fight as hard as that nasty individual and who knew the rules of the game. So I suppose that the argument that those stars will never align again is completely true. The question will be, now that he is elected president, what kind of a track record is he going to have going into the 2020 election? And we've been talking about real big economic growth the last 2 years. A lot of people talking now about an imminent collapse. Bill Maher was saying, boy, he sure hopes the economy crashes so we can get rid of Trump. And somebody did a little meme about a guy who's in an airplane, and he says, "I really hate this pilot. I hope he crashes it into a mountain."
Isn't that just like Rush Limbaugh a few years ago saying about Barack Obama, "I hope he fails"?
There's a difference between saying "I hope he fails" and wishing for an economic collapse, I think. But be that as it may, right now, the last I heard that Donald Trump's approval rating was 47%, which may not sound like much, but I think he's had consistently higher approval ratings than Barack Obama. The tough thing is to say, obviously, Scotty, Donald Trump was the perfect foil to Hillary Clinton because Donald Trump had the guts to call her out in a way that no one else would have ever had the courage to do, ever. Crooked Hillary and lock her up and stuff, that kind of thing is unheard of in a Republican candidate, and that's why he's the president, because that's what politics are today. Of all the things that Donald Trump did tactically in the campaign, and I'm not sure, I don't think that he's the kind of guy that sits, in fact, I'm quite convinced he's not the kind of guy that sits down with focus groups and parses this out the way that, like Mitt Romney and other people who didn't get elected do. But Trump's got an incredible instinct for, I don't want to say for the kill exactly, but to me the defining Trump moment was, I guess it was the second debate, where before the debate, he brought a number of Bill Clinton's victims and put them in the front row. And there's that famous picture that everybody's seen of Clinton looking over there at all of these people who, he's basically either raped or sexually molested. And but the genius of this is it didn't shut up Bill Clinton. It did, but what it did was it took Hillary Clinton's most powerful weapon off the table. Hillary Clinton's most powerful weapon was never her sparkling personality. Hillary Clinton had spent her entire 30-year career making the point that was that the patriarchy was unfair to women, and that we had to shatter the glass ceiling, and the whole idea of the Republican war on women, which was was used effectively against Mitt Romney with his binders of women and all the rest of this stuff. They were setting this whole thing up to get half of the vote of the country, the female vote, in Hillary Clinton's pocket as a champion of women. And when Donald Trump had the genius to bring Bill Clinton's victims, put them in front and center, what he essentially did was he basically dared Hillary Clinton. He dared her to go there, and he took away her most powerful weapon, the whole women's issue. He basically put him there, and said, "Look, if you wanna call yourself a champion of women, Hillary, we'll start talking to these people who your husband assaulted and who you destroyed personally." And that kind of thing, Scotty, is the real kind of political genius of Donald Trump.
So let me take that, Bill, because granting that the benefit of incumbency is almost insuperable, and that Republicans would be loath to walk away from a sitting president and nominate somebody else, nevertheless, couldn't the argument be made that the reason why we needed Donald Trump is because they had Hillary Clinton? It's kind of that line from the Lord of the Rings trilogy of, they've got a cave troll. They got a cave troll, exactly. We need something like that. But now that even the top contenders that we've seen don't appear to be cave trolls, couldn't it be argued that this is not that Donald Trump's time came, he served his purpose, and now it's time that he step aside?
I think you could. Well, let me just say, because I've noticed that there are occasionally cognitive dissonance on YouTube. I'm not calling for Donald Trump to step aside, but I think your point was that the only person who could have won that election was Donald Trump, and that having won the election, is there somebody who could do a better job as president or have a better chance of winning against the Democrats in 2020? That's an interesting issue. As I say, I always try to be honest about all of this stuff. I've said a great many things about Donald Trump that I admire, and there's some things I don't admire. But you really do have to ask yourself if the fact that since Donald Trump got elected, the military's been rebuilt, the economy was certainly growing at a large rate, and we got at least 2 conservative justices. The question now is, would somebody like, off the top of my head, Nikki Haley or somebody like that, somebody a little younger, would they be a better fit for 2020? And I actually kind of think the answer is yes, but it's not up to me. It's if Donald Trump decides to run, and he's announced that he will, then I don't see much way for him to not be the Republican nominee. And if his approval ratings are holding at 48, 49%, those are significantly above Obama's. And I think, look, the people that really, really, really love him all the way. And there are people like me who have mixed feelings about him as a president, but certainly feel that on the fundamental levels, it was a tremendously good deal that we got, especially considering the alternatives. Obviously, there are Republicans and conservatives who are determined that they'll vote for Hillary Clinton again before they vote for Donald Trump, which I can't personally understand, but that's the way it goes. So it's hard to say. But I do think that the point about that particular alignment of stars is a valid point. And I think the main reason for this is that Donald Trump was, in fact, such an outsider. He wasn't. That's kind of the weird sort of thing about Trump was he was an absolute political outsider, but he was not an unknown. He was a celebrity.
Has he sort of lost that advantage, or has he been such an ill fit in official Washington that he still seems like an outsider?
Well, certainly that is true. And I think certainly every time we see evidence of the kind of press plain, I used to call it bias, now we'll just call it what it is, just plain lying about him, actually strengthens him. And so I suspect that what it's going to really come down to, Scott, is how how personal are they going to make the attacks? And if it turns out that we get another basket of deplorable statement from whoever the nominee is on the Democratic side, I think that same reaction among conservatives, which is it's not the culture, it's the gatekeepers of the culture and the information versus the American people. If we look at a situation where we see any kind of sense that once again the Democrats are running these elitists who have nothing but contempt for flyover country and basket of deplorables and all the rest, then I think that the Trump's appeal as a champion of kind of the little guy will win out. And there's an awful lot to be said of 4 years of paychecks from people who weren't working before and so on. Obviously, Donald Trump, I think, is his own worst enemy, and I don't think anybody's going to really have a big argument about that. But to whatever degree he is competitive in 2020, it's his election in 2016 that provided, I genuinely believe, a last chance for this republic. One thing we do know about having watched half of the Trump presidency, at least half, hopefully it'll be a quarter of it, is that this idea of him going in and draining the swamp is not only a real idea. In other words, it's not just political rhetoric. It's not like this doesn't exist. When we see the corruption at the FBI and Comey, IRS, Department of Justice, it is a swamp. And there is, in fact, a deep state of people like James Comey and Strzok and all the rest of these people who are determined to correct the mistakes of the American people who had the audacity to vote against the person they were supposed to vote for. And so I think not only do we see that this actual deep state is there, I think certainly for me, and I think for many supporters of Donald Trump, nobody had any real idea, I think, of how difficult this process is and how time-consuming it is. So if I were advising President Trump for a re-election campaign, my general tack would be line up all of the media bias, line up all of the political corruption, line up all of it, and say this is a big, big job and no one else has the guts to do it. And if he goes on that kind of a campaign, then he will be telling the absolute truth, because I don't think there is anybody. In fact, I'm quite convinced there's nobody out there on the Republican side who has the courage, because it is courage, and also it's a kind of just a not giving a damn, about what people think. If you're going to do to Washington what Washington needs to have done to it, not only do you have to have the courage to go in there, but you also have to have an almost an abnormal disregard for what people think about you, and this seems to be Trump's real strength. This is his self-confidence, which is, again, one of the things that gets him into a fair amount of trouble for some of the things he says, but without which this gigantic job of trying to bring some sense of law and order back to a government that's long been out of control, I think that's really the one thing that becomes indispensable.
Analyzing the news of the day from a foundation of principle, Bill Whittle now comes to you 5 days a week. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com. You can become one of those members by going to BillWhittle.com and clicking the Become a Member link. Choose your level of commitment from producing member to basic member and decide how you'd like to be part of the citizen producers who make this show happen. We will certainly be doing more of this kind of wargaming the 2020 election in advance. And I know that most of you who watch this show will not see this as hand-wringing, but for what it is, which is a playing out of the various scenarios. And I appreciate the opportunity to be part of that. with Bill, and we get a lot of feedback from our viewers, and so keep it coming. There's a contact link on the website, and of course we read your comments at YouTube as well as at billwhittle.com. We look forward to those suggestions as 2019 rolls ahead, and we look forward to more fascinating news like this. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at billwhittle.com for making this possible.